going to start with a PowerPoint on background for the Delaware Community Benefits Agreement Coalition. And we're going to talk about a lot of things related to this port. We're going to talk about something called environmental justice and what that means. This will be part of the presentation. And I'll just start off by saying I grew up in a community in Pittsburgh that was absolutely an environmental justice community. I've looked at the data there. African-American community there, high levels of disinvestment. If you go to the maps, Simeon Hahn's going to go over some maps. And I've done this, and you look at what's happening there with lead and other contaminants. It's very similar to the profiles of many communities here that we're going to be talking about, that are both black and white in this area, that are experiencing just a level of disinvestment and I would say a level of disrespect to communities. And it has serious complications and implications for the health and stability of communities. And this port expansion is one project that is going to exacerbate that. So, the Delaware Community Benefits Agreement Coalition, who are we? We are a cross-section, diverse cross-section of the Delaware community. Our members, allies include local residents, civic associations, civil rights organizations. We've reached out to labor, even community-based organizations, and we're reaching out again to faith-based organizations, etc. And we've reached some of those by going door to door, as we've contacted you. Most of you have been through canvassing, direct contact with members of the community. We have members that include groups like the Banking Desert Initiative, Collins Park Civic Association, Delaware Africa Coalition, Edgemore Revitalization Cooperative, Inc., Newcastle Prevention Coalition, Southbridge Civic Association, Rose Hill Garden Civic Association, Sierra Club, Delaware Chapter, and Network Delaware. So really great to have all these groups that have helped to support us in this work, and we're working to expand this because we know one of the things that we're going to talk about today is we have power, the power of people to make a difference. What do we do? The coalition was principally formed in order to develop the terms and to oversee implementation and compliance of a community benefits agreement framework, and really prioritizing community, economic, and environmental health and sustainability. We're committed to addressing community needs and concerns related to economic and community development, and making sure that those processes address issues of racial equality, as well as economic equality, as well as environmental justice and protection of the environment and health of the people of communities. A community benefits agreement is a legally binding tool that outlines the terms of an agreement between a developer and a broad community coalition that proactively identifies potential issues associated with a project, along with mitigation plans and benefits to the community. So it's legally binding, and that's what we're working to achieve here, because there are agreements that aren't legally binding. If they're not legally binding, it's basically a piece of paper. You put it down, the company does what they want to do because you don't have any way to hold them accountable. And so we want to make sure that it's legally binding. That's critical. This could be a win-win opportunity. It's certainly an opportunity for community buy-in. We've talked with, just in a couple of days, some 90+ people face-to-face in communities here, so we know that people are receptive. They signed petitions or these signature forms that we had, giving information, saying contact us, so we know that the interest is there. That's documented. We know that. And some of the people who did the canvassing are here in this room, so we know that that's real. Opportunities for jobs and training through community benefits that go to and support communities. Dealing with issues of the pollution and mitigating that, having input into how is this going to be addressed. And of course, environmental and social justice and inclusion of all people who need to be included, principally starting with the people who are going to be most impacted, who live in communities close to the port. That has not been happening. So I do want to talk a little bit about environmental justice, because that term is being used a lot. And I do a lot of work in this arena, and just to use this short piece, there's a whole presentation you could do about environmental justice. That's another presentation. But environmental racism is the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on people of color. Environmental justice is the movement's response to environmental racism. So when people are excluded or dumped on because of race or class, people that don't have money, who are poor, whether they're white or black, they get dumped on. That should not be the case. Environmental equity is how the government has approached this, which is kind of like, we want to spread this around. You shouldn't be doing this community, it should be done fairly. But environmental justice doesn't want to do that. Environmental justice, as it lists here, wants to abolish those harms, not to redistribute them. No one should be living in an environment that's polluted. Sharing it, why? It should not happen. So that's what we're talking about. And we think that's a point of unity to bring communities together, because we all breathe the air, drink the water, we eat food, etc. We live in communities that are close to what's going to be a massive development. So speaking of that, this port, this was from 2018. This project is going to be numbers from 400 million to like $1 billion. But this was an article from 2018. And I was there at the opening of the port with all the big officials and everything like that. It was supposed to do so many great things and so many jobs and improve, but that hasn't happened. If you've looked at some of the newspaper articles, you can see that that has not panned out. And you can see here, you have the governor there, you have, I think the ambassador from United Arab Emirates, you have one of the key officials, I guess the CEO of Gulf Tainer, the company that signed this 50-year concession agreement to basically manage the port. It's all shaky, and again, the newspapers are reporting this very, very closely. Our goals, the goals of the Delaware Community Benefits Agreement Coalition. We want to secure a binding community benefits agreement from Gulf Tainer and associated entities. Those entities would be Diamond State Port Corporation and the state of Delaware. The state of Delaware, essentially, Diamond State Port Corporation is basically a creation of a state. So those two entities are involved in an agreement with Gulf Tainer that actually is the group that's managing the port. And I know there's been some, please.
Yeah. What agency with the state is in charge of the port?
DNREC.
Okay.
So we go through, this is the governor, there's DNREC, and then there's the Diamond State Port Corporation.
Well,
And one of the key things also is that there's Jeff Bullock, who is the Secretary of State, who's on the board of that. So that's key. So let me finish with the goals here. So the port goals: secure a binding community benefits agreement from Gulf Tainer and associated entities. And that will be Diamond State Port Corporation and the state, and of course, Gulf Tainer. Win protections from potential health, environmental dangers, as well as safeguards against displacement of existing residents due to the port expansion. And what happens frequently when a port like this expands, you have warehouses and other entities that come to be close to the port that puts pressure on the real estate, and that can lead to people being actually kicked out of the houses. It changes the nature of communities in a dramatic way. Right now, we don't have information, so we don't know what's going to happen. There's no plan that is available to the public. There's no discussion going on. Establish an inclusive port development planning process. That absolutely has not existed, and we can talk about that, and we can give you some of our experiences dealing with the state to try to just ask some questions. And then to get additional public hearings and public meetings. So the hearings that they have already have not been very interactive. They talk to you, you can't talk back. Meetings, we can have more control. We want maybe a combination of both of those, but things where they have to actually answer questions. We know from talking with members of the community on the canvassing and response that you gave to us that there are a lot of things going on. Some communities have been experiencing levels of disinvestment, as in they have not received resources for a long period of time. There's something called Justice 40, which is happening at the national level. Simeon's going to reference that. But that's going to be something that's very important that can help along with other resources. But without communities organized for power to protect their interests, they could put $50 billion into this state. If communities are not organized, those resources will not go to communities. And that's why it's so important that you're here. We reach out and expand to get more people engaged. And having worked in community economic development at the local level and national level, I can tell you, many of the groups that have done this for a long time, they know how this works. Whenever there's money that comes from the government, they're lined up, they have the resources to get in front of that and get a big part of the money. And frequently, what dribbles down to communities is like pretty much just a dribble. So it's important that we organize to make demands so we can stop this disproportionate siting of facilities that pollute into our communities. And Simeon is going to go over that and show you some of the impacts of that related to cancer, asthma, etc., from maps with documented data to show you the implications of this. Because when the port expands, there's going to be a huge increase in truck traffic. So to the port itself, we have several different permits that were the center of our discussions with the port. And we appealed one of them called the subaqueous lands permit. And as you can see, I think this area right here, this is where they're going to be doing the dredging. It says proposed dredge area. This is from one of the plans that was put together and presented to the public, the Edgemoor Environmental Assessment. So they're going to be moving about 3.1 cubic yards of earth. There's going to be extensive shoreline habitat loss, significant subaqueous impacts like underneath the water. They're going to be dredging all this out. There's not been significant community impact or input rather into this process. And the mitigation, what they're going to do to correct things, that has just not been clear what they're going to do. And according to the Secretary of State here, Jeff Bullock, essentially they're in a position and they believe they have permits approved at a level that they can begin to potentially start doing this project as early as December. Now, there's a massive level of a lack of information. And so for us, how do you do this? Some of the things that will be dredged that are already in the soil under the water are aromatic hydrocarbons, metals, dioxins, and PCBs. These are all toxic, so there's concerns about how that's going to be done. What have we done so far? We've reached out to build a network of community residents. As we went out and canvassed and said, we talked to, just in a couple of short Saturdays with a small group, reached about 90 plus people direct face-to-face, and then we're going to continue to follow up as we gave you calls. We're going to continue to call others. We've engaged in public forums, expanded participation. We've received technical assistance. The Delaware Community Benefits Agreement Coalition is on the site of the EPA, the National EPA. We've met with Gulf Tainer multiple times. We filed this appeal, and they pushed back, saying that we didn't have standing. But we went through that process, and they have to respond within the next couple of days, and I think it's within 90 days, which is probably coming up like
3 days from now.
Okay, 3 days from now. Thank you, Simeon. 3 days from now, so it's 90 days, which is that I guess they're going to wait till the last day before they respond. But then we have 30 days to respond after they do that. So, that's where we are with that. We've challenged the board, and there's documentation of the hearing. It's a transcript that will let you know how this took place and the way that they treat community residents when community residents ask questions. And we conducted outreach to bring more communities into this process, and we want to fight for real community engagement. That's what we're really working to get achieved. Next steps. We want to continue with community-driven outreach and education. Community-driven outreach and education. We know that there's a lot of people that don't know this is going on. We learned that when we went out and talked with folks. We have to push to get more people to know, and that's by everything that we did when we talked with you, meeting you in the street. You signed a petition, a form, we called you up. We're following up with you. We have to do that many more times in multiple communities, because we get people to participate and know that nothing will change unless people take action. That's the only way this changes. If we don't raise our voices, this is just going to go, and we'll just have to live with the consequences, which are not good. And you'll see that when Simeon shows these maps in a couple of minutes here. We got to get Gulf Tainer, Diamond State Port Corporation, thank you so much, and others to detail the plans. So Gulf Tainer, Diamond State Port Corporation in the state to release details of the plans. Why is that so hard? Just to reinforce this, I had a call with Region 3 EPA. They are having problems getting information from DNREC. This is the EPA, Region 3. And the person's expressing frustration. I know we're doing what we can. It's really frustrating. It's really difficult to get information. I'm thinking like, I'm talking to the EPA, and they're having problems getting information from DNREC. So just to give you a sense of how really bad this process is of sharing information. And whenever that happens, having worked in politics a little bit, I would say that when people are that reluctant to give you information, it's probably not a good sign. That it's just something that you don't want the public to know. And I don't understand it. If you have approved permits, that means you've gone through a process, and you should have done X, Y, and Z. It seems like you should be able to just go to the shelf, take it off the shelf, here's what we did to prove it, and make it public. But that's not happening. Very difficult. We want to engage the port and key stakeholders. That's critical that we engage them now around the CBA to start the discussion about the CBA with Gulf Canyon. And then press on the state, endowment state poor corporations, but Gulf Canyon is the group that has the actual agreement. And those are the parties to it. We want to maintain a focus on action, participation, so we get many more people involved. It's critical that we do that. Focus on issues of health, the health of the community. And Simeon is going to talk about some of those implications. We want to focus and continue to address issues of environmental justice. It is not right for race, class, etc., to disproportionately continue to cite these facilities and or to do things that we know are going to have big impacts on communities. Thank you so much. And we want to make sure that we address and continue to address issues of environmental pollution and its impact on our communities. We are part of the environment. It supports us. It's part of how we get our life, our food, our water, and we have to protect it as we protect each other and do this together. And we want to make sure that communities are not displaced by this development. And that displacement can be, as I mentioned earlier, from facilities coming there, warehouses, putting pressure on real estate, people having to move. But it can also be from the rumbling of trucks over and over through communities, the air that is foul so much that you begin to smell it, and you see seems to be more accidents occurring, etc., and it's relentless. And this could happen because if they hit their goals, they want to expand the port dramatically to get more trucks. That's the goal. That's something that has to be done in a way that communities get to see, hear, and participate in how that's going to be done to reduce those impacts. We have to continue to expand and strengthen the Delaware Community Benefits Agreement Coalition so that we have the power that we need to press back. We want transparency, we want accountability, we want respect. Transparency, accountability, and respect. We want a community benefits agreement. We want a binding community benefits agreement. You can support this work by joining, and we'll talk about this later. Delaware Community Benefits Agreement. You can recruit others, you can volunteer, spread the word. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later. I want to thank you very much. Simeon Hans about to come on in a moment here. It's going to take action. It's going to take us working together. It's going to take us working together in ways that many of us have never done. I'm familiar with, although I wasn't born here, how communities have interacted. Some there's segregation here and people don't talk. We've got to move past that. Because while we're doing that kind of stuff, they're going to move this thing forward. And then we're all going to be like saying, well, how did this happen? We have to keep that from happening. Together we are stronger. Together we are strong. Can you all say that? Together we are stronger. Together we are stronger. Together we are stronger. Together we are stronger. And we have to do that. Thank you very much. Simeon Hans is going to come up. He's going to take us through and show you some of the implications. Then after he's done, we're going to have some discussion and then talk about action. Simeon.
Yay! Quite a hype up. I was only given 10 minutes, and I'm just going to try to talk about, Jeff mentioned environmental justice communities. So I wanted to highlight a couple tools that can identify environmental justice communities. And some of the preliminary things, what some of the outputs are telling us and how is this related to the port. Justice 40 is another conversation, as Jeff mentioned, and Jeff mentioned a lot of money coming for infrastructure. Now, I just wanted to highlight a couple things here in this, is that 40% of the money is supposed to go to disadvantaged environmental justice communities. This is at the state level. This is Larry Lambert's group, which formed this Justice 40 Oversight Committee. Their task is to identify disadvantaged and marginalized communities. That means map them, identify them. That's where the money will go. That report should be available, some of their work, by the end of this year. One of the tools that the federal government provided for the state to use to determine their environmental justice communities is this economic justice screening tool. This was from February of 2022. And this is a map that shows the gray here is what is determined to be an environmental justice community. And you can see, like Jeff said, how it's connected. From Edgemore, that's the port expansion area. Down here is the existing port. And you probably recognize a lot of these communities. You can see that they follow the river a lot. This is the Christina River, this is the Brandywine River. That's a lot of part of the history of Wilmington, pollution, socioeconomics and such. It's called the River City, but river is maybe not in a condition to be too proud of. Although are a lot of people very proud and fighting for it. Now the EPA also has a screening tool, and I can help with people if they reach out about how to use it. Both of these tools are available on the internet and are active, they're easy to use. These are, again, a couple of outputs. These are socioeconomic indicators. The one I chose was people of color for this particular example. And what it does is it shows the distribution in percentiles. So I don't know if people know about percentiles, but if you had 100 people lined up from smallest to tallest, the tallest people would be the 100th percentile, the shortest would be the one. You can think about it that way, but it's a population versus individual. But basically, it's saying that the people of color in this area are in the 95th to 100th percentile. It's one of the highest densities of people of color in the state. Probably not that surprising. This is a map showing diesel particulate matter. And again, on this one, think about this. Red is bad, orange is bad. You know, the darker, the worse. This is diesel particulate matter. Okay? This is comparing to the U.S., across the U.S. Again, see the red. Very high populations or concentrations. Now, when you look within the state, this is compared to the state. This is the diesel, again, diesel particulate matter. This is the Port of Wilmington, and it's a very big generator of diesel particulate matter. And as are the roads and the trucks and things like that. So you can see within the state, this is one of the worst areas in the state. This one is showing traffic proximity. Again, and I'll show one thing here in a second. This is in the US. So this area, Wilmington, with 95, 495, say some of the highest traffic in the country. Again, high 95 percentile. You know, but when you look in the state, it's even worse. Again, here's the port. This is where Miss Reed lives, down around here. You know, so you see increased traffic in the state. Edgemoor is already a high traffic area. This is before the port. And as Jeff mentioned, there's going to be warehouses. We know there's one in Tri-State coming. They're all over the place. So transportation is a major issue. This one is pretty astounding to me. So here I looked at, the last one was environmental justice indices. This one is looking at all 12 of them. Particulate matter, diesel particulate matter, air toxics, respiratory hazard index, lead paint, facilities with hazardous or with dangerous chemicals, underground storage tanks, ozone, air toxics, cancer risk, traffic proximity, Superfund site proximity, hazardous waste proximity, wastewater discharge. All of these areas are above the 80th percentile for all of those indicators. So it's like the worst of the worst. Just showing a couple maps here from the CEQ output. They do theirs a little bit differently, but it's still connected, but they do it by census blocks. So this is the Edgemoor census blocks. And this was identified as an environmental justice community, primarily for the clean water and wastewater infrastructure violations. So let's say the water's bad. But this one is more Ms. Reed's neighborhood. That one is also identified, but it has a couple categories: legacy pollution and health. 90th percent, it's a very high area for asthma. And this is their criteria. That wasn't good enough, that it's 90%. You still had to meet these thresholds, which are, you had to be very low income and have most of the population not in higher education or enrolled in higher education. This one shows climate change in the state, which is interesting because Ms. Reed was just at an event celebrating the South Wilmington wetlands. Their criteria for climate change was expected agricultural loss rate, doesn't apply much to Wilmington. Building loss rate, it's still pretty high percentage, 87th percentile, below the 90th. Population loss rate, below 90th, but it's 89. So this didn't qualify, which is crazy. It did meet the low income and the other criteria. And we know this area floods. And with sea level rise projections, why isn't flooding included in climate change? So these tools aren't perfect. I've commented on these, trying to do things. I just got a couple of pictures to end with. This is Hay Road. Just real quick. Hay Road is like from here to here. This is the landfill. It's up here, Fox Point Park. Landfill, wastewater treatment plant, energy productions. Here's the trucks already lined up. We don't even have a port there yet on Edgemore. Here's what the shoreline looks like from, this is previous pollution, but this is this Fox Point State Park. This is an eroding shoreline. There's going to be more erosion because of the change of the dredging and all this kind of stuff. The state didn't do a great job with this in my opinion, but shoreline access is already prohibited. We have no access to the Delaware River, to most of our waters in the city, which is terrible. And just a couple, ending with a couple things. So, and then we'll get into the discussion. This recreational use was one of the things I talked about, my standing. I live near there. And these jerks told me I had no standing, dismissed my suit. You know, besides the health things, you know, I live there. As part of, in regards to the permits, there was state agency, I think there are many state agencies, but DNREC is the one that issued the permit. That's who we had our appeal with. The mitigation was included in the DNREC permit. So we didn't have a chance to comment on it. That was one of our grievances, which we weren't even able to air. But they're going to do some mitigation at Fox Point Park. They're going to do some mitigation on the Brandywine River and some other stuff. But we want them. We wrote a letter to the Army Corps of Engineers, partnering with the Claymont community, saying we wanted the Claymont Riverfront Park at the old steel plant be included as mitigation to provide more access to the river. The Army Corps of Engineers also did not get back to us. So the state, the federal agencies, both of them are out here about how much they're doing in environmental justice. They're not even responding to people at this point. So there's a lot of work, at least with our group, that we have to do. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you, Simeon. That was excellent, and I think puts everything into focus. So, and we want to thank again Dustin Sierra Club for recording, because I think there's a lot of people that would benefit from seeing this when we get this out, and this is really a great service. We thank you. So what we'd like to do now is to, and we have a smaller group, just to have some discussion. Have a period of discussion, and then after that, we have a couple of forms we'd like to get out to you, because we want to, obviously, we can't do this if we don't take action. We're talking about the need for action. So we'd like to open it up and see if you have questions. I mean, we can have a general discussion about the port, where we are, some things that are happening. I know I had a chance to talk with Ms. Costa, just last night we had a chance to talk. And maybe why don't we do that? Maybe just at least go through the room really quickly.